I accidentally overheard my daughter's fiancé sneering to his father. At the ceremony, I'm going to humiliate this pathetic old fool in front of everyone. They laughed, convinced I was just a rich, blind idiot paying for it all. I smiled quietly in the shadows, and simply didn't show up to the wedding. The next day, their smug faces turned ghostly white. They dropped to their knees, begging for mercy when they realized I knew everything, and I had already struck back. Before continuing, subscribe to our new channel, where we tell stories about men who take revenge on their insolent children, sons-in-law, and daughters-in-law. My name is Thomas Merrick. I'm 64 years old, living in Tampa, Florida. I built Merrick Premium Motors from the ground up, 5 dealerships across the state. Started as a mechanic with grease under my fingernails, ended up with my signature on franchise agreements worth millions. I always thought success meant providing for your family, giving them opportunities you never had. Turns out, sometimes you just hand them a golden shovel to dig your grave. My daughter Allison used to be different. 28 now, works in marketing for some tech company I can't pronounce. Smart girl, beautiful too, got her mother's green eyes and determination. I remember when she was 7, sitting on my workbench in the garage, asking me to explain every tool, every part. She wanted to understand how things worked. That curiosity, that genuine interest in the world, it made me proud. That was before Justin Caldwell. 3 years ago, she brought him to Sunday dinner. Financial consultant, she said. He showed up in a suit that probably cost more than my first car. Handshake like a dead fish. Smile that never reached his eyes. From the first moment, something about him felt off. The way he looked around my house, the house I bought with my own money, every square foot paid for, like he was appraising it for auction. But Allison was glowing. She hung on his every word. When he spoke, which was constantly, she watched him like he was revealing the secrets of the universe. He talked about investment portfolios, market trends, cryptocurrency. I nodded politely, ate my pot roast, and wondered what happened to the daughter who used to help me restore vintage cars on weekends. The change was gradual. First, she stopped visiting as often. Then the phone calls became shorter, more transactional. When she did come by, Justin was always with her, always steering the conversation to money. My money, specifically. You know, Thomas, he'd say, never called me Mr. Merrick, never asked if he could use my first name. You really should consider diversifying your assets. Keeping everything in those dealerships is risky. I could set up a consultation with my firm. I'd smile and change the subject. I didn't need financial advice from a 31-year-old who probably couldn't change his own oil. The wedding announcement came 2 months ago. Allison called me at the dealership, voice bright with forced enthusiasm. Dad, we've set a date. April 12th at the Renaissance Vinoy Resort in St. Petersburg. It's going to be perfect. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I said, meaning it. Despite my reservations about Justin, I wanted her to be happy. Whatever you need, I'm here. Well, actually, we were hoping you could help with the costs. Justin's parents are contributing, but the venue alone is $43,000 and... I stopped her there. Send me the budget. I'll take care of it. The silence on the other end told me she'd expected a fight. Really? Dad, Thank you. Thank you so much. You're my daughter, Allison. I'd do anything for you. I meant it then. The bills started arriving the next week. Catering, $28,000. Band, $8,500. Flowers and decorations, $12,300. Photography, $9,000. The final total hit $85,000. I paid every invoice without comment, watching my bank account shrink while my unease grew. Allison never asked if I could afford it. Justin never thanked me. They just kept sending invoices like I was an ATM with a pulse. The evening of March 15th started normally. I'd spent the day at the Dale Mabry dealership dealing with a supplier issue and came home exhausted. My house sits right on Bayshore Boulevard, 2-story Mediterranean style. Water view that usually calms me down after a long day, but that night I needed something more hands-on. I headed to the garage out back, my sanctuary. In the center, covered partially by a tarp, sat my current project, a 1967 Chevrolet Impala in Madeira, maroon. Found her 2 years ago in a barn outside Ocala. Engine seized, interior destroyed, but the frame was solid. I'd been bringing her back to life one piece at a time. I was elbow deep in the carburetor, the radio playing old Motown, when I heard voices drifting through the open window. The garage shares a wall with the living room, and the March evening was warm enough that I'd left the windows open. I didn't pay attention at first. Allison and Justin had been staying at my place for the past week, while their apartment was being fumigated. Then Justin's voice cut through the music, sharp with an edge I'd never heard before. "No, Dad, listen to me. This is perfect. The old man is paying for everything and he doesn't even question it." I turned off the radio. The sudden silence made every word crystal clear. "He's so desperate for her approval," Justin continued, his tone dripping with contempt. "It's actually pathetic. He'll do anything she asks. We're going to clean up on this wedding." My hands tightened on the wrench I was holding. I moved closer to the window, staying in the shadows of the garage. "On the ceremony," Justin said, his voice animated now, excited, "I'm going to humiliate this pathetic old fool in front of everyone. Picture his face when I say in my toast that he's just a mechanic who got lucky, that he doesn't belong in the same room as your family." The voice on the other end, his father, I assumed, was too quiet to hear clearly, but Justin's laugh told me everything I needed to know. "Finally, someone's going to put him in his place." That was definitely his father, Richard, the volume rising. "These nouveau riche types need a lesson in humility. He thinks money makes him sophisticated. We'll show everyone what he really is." The blood pounded in my ears. I stood there in my garage, surrounded by tools I'd collected over 40 years, next to a car I was restoring with my own hands, listening to my daughter's fiancé plot to destroy me at a wedding I was paying $85,000 to host. Part of me wanted to storm into that living room right then, confront him, throw him out of my house, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the mechanic in me. When something's broken, you don't just start smashing parts. You diagnose the problem. You make a plan. I cleaned my hands slowly, deliberately, and walked back into the house through the side door. Justin was in my living room, sprawled on my leather couch, shoes still on, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, his whole demeanor shifted like someone flipped a switch. The sneer vanished, replaced by that bland, pleasant smile. "Hey, Thomas, just talking to my dad about the seating arrangements. We'll catch up later, Dad." He ended the call. "How's the car coming?" "Fine," I said. My voice sounded normal, even to my own ears. "I'm heading to bed. Long day." "Sure thing. Oh, by the way, we're thinking of upgrading the champagne for the reception. Nothing crazy, just something a bit nicer. Maybe another 3,000. I looked at him, really looked at him. At the practiced smile, the calculated casualness, the absolute certainty that I was too stupid, too grateful for my daughter's attention to ever see through him. "Send me the invoice," I said. His smile widened. "You're the best, Thomas. Allison is so lucky to have a dad like you." I went upstairs to my study and closed the door. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my leather chair, the one I bought when I opened my third dealership, and thought about everything. I remembered Allison at 12, crying because she hadn't made the soccer team. I'd taken her out for ice cream, told her that setbacks just meant you tried harder next time. She'd practiced every day for a month and made the team the next year. I remembered her at 16, bringing home her first real boyfriend. I'd shaken his hand, made small talk, and after he left, she'd hugged me and said, "Thanks for not being weird, Dad. I was so nervous." I'd told her I trusted her judgment. I remembered her college graduation. She'd walked across that stage, gotten her diploma, and when they called her name, she'd pointed at me in the crowd. Later, at dinner, she'd raised her glass and said, "To my dad, who made all of this possible." Where did that girl go? When did gratitude turn into entitlement? When did love turn into transaction? The answer sat in my living room, probably already asleep in my guest room, on my sheets, under my roof. Justin Caldwell hadn't just changed my daughter. He'd revealed something that was maybe always there, waiting for the right person to unlock it. A willingness to see me not as her father, but as a resource to be exploited. The thought hurt more than anything Justin had said, but pain has a way of sharpening focus. By the time the sun started rising over Tampa Bay, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to argue or plead or try to change Allison's mind. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted, or what they thought they wanted. They wanted my money. They'd get it. They wanted me out of the way. I'd disappear from that wedding completely. But first, I was going to find out exactly who Justin Caldwell really was. I was going to find out what Richard Caldwell found so amusing about humiliating me. And then I was going to teach both of them what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. The next morning, I found Allison in the kitchen making coffee. She looked beautiful in the early light, hair pulled back, wearing one of those expensive athleisure outfits that cost more than I used to make in a week. "Morning, Dad," she said, not looking up from her phone. "We need to talk." Something in my tone made her glance up. "Is everything okay?" "That depends. Tell me about Justin." She stiffened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you love him? Is he good to you?" "Of course I love him. Why are you asking this now?" "Because I'm your father, and I want to make sure you're making the right choice." Her expression hardened. That new look I'd seen too often lately. "This is about you not liking him, isn't it? You've never given him a real chance. You think nobody's good enough for me? That's not... You're jealous. You're jealous that I have someone in my life who actually understands modern finance, who's successful in his own right, who doesn't think the pinnacle of achievement is selling cars." Each word landed like a punch. I kept my face neutral. "If that's what you think. Justin says you're stuck in the past, that you don't understand how the world works anymore. And you know what? He's right. You're old-fashioned and judgmental, and I'm tired of apologizing for my fiancé to you." I nodded slowly. "Understood. I just wanted to hear it from you." She looked slightly guilty, but it passed quickly. "The wedding's in less than a month, Dad. Can we just get through this without drama?" "No drama," I promised. "I'll stay out of your way." I meant it differently than she understood it. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to a private investigator whose name I'd gotten from my attorney years ago. The second was to that same attorney, Roger Wilson, requesting a meeting about estate planning. The third was to my banker. If Justin and Richard Caldwell thought I was just a lucky mechanic, they were about to learn their first lesson. I didn't get lucky. I got smart. And I stayed smart. The game was on. 3 days later, I sat across from Martin Stevens in a coffee shop on Armenia Avenue. He looked exactly like you'd expect a private investigator to look. Mid-50s, forgettable face, eyes that noticed everything. I'd found him through a discreet recommendation from my business attorney. Not a friend, just a professional who came highly recommended. "I need information on the Caldwell family," I said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was $5,000 in cash. "Father and son, Richard and Justin Caldwell. Everything you can find. Financial records, employment history, legal issues, business dealings. I want to know who they really are." Martin didn't ask questions. That's why he got the cash up front. 2 weeks enough? I need something in 4 days. The rest can come as you find it." He pocketed the envelope. "You'll have it." That same afternoon, I met with Roger Wilson at his office downtown. Roger specialized in estate planning and property law, dry, technical work that most people found boring. I found it fascinating. The law, when properly understood, was the most elegant weapon ever created. "Thomas, good to see you," Roger said, gesturing to a chair. "Your assistant mentioned you wanted to discuss your estate?" "I want to restructure everything, move my assets into a living trust. Can that be done quickly?" Roger leaned back, fingers steepled. "It can. May I ask what's prompting this?" "Let's call it preventative maintenance." He smiled slightly. "The wedding, among other things?" We spent 2 hours going through my assets, the dealerships, the house, investment accounts, the rental properties I'd accumulated over the decades. Roger took notes, asked questions, never once suggested I was being paranoid. By the end, we had a plan. "This will take approximately 3 weeks to finalize," he said. "The trust documents need to be drafted, notarized, and properly recorded. But once it's done, you'll have complete control during your lifetime, with very specific conditions for transfer upon your death." "Perfect. And Roger, this stays between us. Attorney-client privilege, always." Meanwhile, Allison and Justin were in full wedding planning mode. The invoices kept coming like clockwork. Catering upgrade, $28,000. Live band instead of DJ, $8,500. Floral arrangements that could have fed a small country, $12,300. A photo booth, specialty cocktails, custom monogram napkins. Every email brought a new expense. I paid them all without comment. The funny thing was, my silence seemed to unsettle Allison more than any argument would have. She called me that Thursday evening, her voice uncertain. "Dad, did you get the invoice for the upgraded catering package?" "I did." "Already transferred the payment." Pause. "Just like that?" "It's your wedding, sweetheart. I want it to be perfect." Another pause, longer this time. "Are you feeling okay?" I almost laughed. She was suspicious of me being generous. When had that happened? When had my daughter become someone who expected me to fight her over money? "I'm fine, Allison. Just want you to be happy." "Oh, okay. Well, thank you." After she hung up, I sat there thinking about that conversation, about the surprise in her voice when I simply gave her what she asked for. Justin had trained her well, trained her to see me as an obstacle, a resource that needed to be managed and manipulated, rather than a father who loved her. I watched them over the next several days with new eyes. They came by the house to discuss wedding details, and I observed them like a mechanic examining a faulty engine. Every tell, every micro-expression, every casual cruelty. Justin sprawled on my furniture like he owned it. He helped himself to my whiskey without asking. He name-dropped constantly. People he knew, deals he'd made, his supposed financial acumen. All of it designed to remind me that he was the sophisticated one, the modern success, while I was just the old man who got lucky in a dying industry. "You know, Thomas," he said one evening, swirling my 20-year-old scotch in my crystal glass, "Allison and I have been talking about the future. After we're married, we're thinking of starting a financial consulting firm together. We could really use some startup capital, maybe 100,000 to get things off the ground." Allison shot him a look, quick, nervous. So that was the next play. The wedding was just the opening bid. "That's interesting," I said mildly. "What kind of consulting?" "Wealth management for high-net-worth individuals. People like you, actually. You'd be surprised how many successful people don't know how to properly structure their assets." "I'm sure I would be." He missed the sarcasm completely. "Exactly. So you understand why this is such a great opportunity. We could even make you our first client. Pro bono, of course, since you're family." "How generous?" "We're thinking we could launch right after the honeymoon. What do you say? Want to invest in your daughter's future?" I looked at Allison. She was studying her hands, not meeting my eyes. She knew what they were doing. On some level, she had to know. "Let me think about it," I said. Justin grinned. "Take your time. We're not going anywhere." That was the moment I realized just how deep this went. The wedding wasn't the end game. It was the beginning. They planned to bleed me slowly, systematically, using Allison as bait and my love for her as the hook. The consulting firm would fail. Of course it would. But not before consuming that 100,000. Then there'd be another opportunity, another investment, another chance to fund their lifestyle while they patronized me. The next morning, Martin called. "I've got your preliminary report. You free?" We met at the same coffee shop. This time he brought a folder. "Richard Caldwell is drowning," Martin said without preamble, sliding documents across the table. "His investment firm used to be legitimate, but the last 5 years have been a disaster. Bad calls, worse timing, clients leaving in droves. He's currently $340,000 in debt, spread across 4 creditors. His house in Clearwater, worth about $520,000, is mortgaged to the hilt. He's 3 months behind on the payments." I studied the papers. Credit reports, property records, business filings. Martin was thorough. "What about Justin?" That's where it gets interesting. Martin pulled out another set of documents. "Justin's been fired from 3 different firms in the last 7 years. Each time, it was hushed up. No official record, just quiet resignations with NDAs attached. But I've got sources. The pattern is consistent. He'd get access to client accounts, make unauthorized trades, pocket the commissions. Nothing big enough to prosecute, but enough to get him shown the door. And his current employer doesn't know? They know he's had multiple positions. They don't know why he left them. He's good at selling himself, and he's working at a mid-tier firm now that doesn't do deep background checks. I sat back, processing this. Justin Caldwell wasn't just arrogant and cruel. He was a con artist who'd found the perfect mark, my daughter, and through her, me. "There's more," Martin said. "I pulled your daughter's financial records. Public information only," he added quickly. "She and Justin took out a joint personal loan 3 weeks ago. $75,000 from a private lending company. Interest rate is criminal. They used her credit score since his is garbage." "What's the loan for?" "Officially? Home improvements and relocation expenses. But they're still living in that apartment you're paying for, and they're not moving until after the wedding. So they'd already started spending money they didn't have. Probably assumed the wedding would solve their problems. I'd seen the gift registry. They'd requested cash gifts instead of traditional presents, citing their desire to invest in their future together. Now I knew what future they meant, using my guests' generosity to pay off their debts. The pieces were coming together beautifully. "Keep digging," I told Martin. "I want everything on Justin. Employment records, references, anything his current company should know but doesn't." "Will do. What are you planning?" "Nothing illegal," I said. "Just making sure people have all the information they need to make informed decisions." After Martin left, I made several phone calls. The first was to my banker, a woman named Patricia Rodriguez, who'd helped me structure financing for my 4th dealership expansion. We weren't friends, but we had a professional relationship built on mutual respect and a lot of mutual profit. "Patricia, I need information about purchasing debt. How does that work in Florida?" "You looking to become a creditor?" she asked, intrigued. "Possibly. If I wanted to buy someone's outstanding debts from their current creditors, what would that involve?" She walked me through it. In Florida, debt buying was legal and relatively straightforward. The original creditor sells the debt, usually at a significant discount because they've given up on collecting it, and the buyer becomes the new creditor with all the same rights to collect. It happens thousands of times a day in the financial industry. Most creditors would rather get 60 or 70 cents on the dollar now than chase someone for years trying to get 100 cents, Patricia explained, especially if the debtor has a history of missing payments. "And if I wanted to purchase specific debts, could that be arranged discreetly? Through intermediaries? Absolutely. Happens all the time. The debtor wouldn't necessarily know who the new creditor is until you're ready to reveal yourself. Hypothetically, if someone owed $340,000 across multiple creditors, what might I expect to pay? Depends on the debt's age and the debtor's payment history. For seriously delinquent debt, you could probably get it for $250,000 to $290,000, maybe less." We talked for another 20 minutes. Patricia agreed to make some discreet inquiries about Richard Caldwell's creditors. She didn't ask why I was interested. That's why I liked her. The following Monday, I met with Philip Thompson, a notary public, who specialized in complex estate documents. Roger had recommended him for the trust paperwork. "These beneficiary conditions are very specific," Philip noted, reviewing Roger's drafts. "You're essentially creating a contingent inheritance based on behavior during your lifetime." "Is that legal in Florida?" "Completely. You can set almost any conditions you want, as long as they're not illegal or against public policy. Requiring respect and support from beneficiaries? Courts uphold that regularly." "Good, because I want every detail documented. Every conversation, every incident. If I say someone violated the trust conditions, I want there to be no doubt." Philip nodded slowly. "You're building a case." "I'm protecting myself." While all this was happening, Allison called almost daily with wedding updates I didn't care about, and expenses I paid without question. She'd started to sound almost apologetic about the costs, which was new. Maybe some part of her recognized that she'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. "Dad, the photographer wants an extra $2,000 for a second shooter. I told him it was too much, but Justin thinks—" "Pay it," I said. "I want your wedding to be perfect, remember?" "Are you sure? It's getting so expensive." "I'm sure, sweetheart." The silence on the other end was heavy with confusion. She wanted me to fight her. She expected resistance. My complete compliance threw her off balance, and that imbalance was exactly what I needed. Justin, meanwhile, had started dropping hints about the honeymoon. We're thinking Bora Bora, 2 weeks at the Four Seasons. Allison deserves the best, don't you think, Thomas? She does, I agreed. It's about $35,000 for the package we want. All-inclusive, overwater bungalow, the whole experience. Send me the details. He actually looked surprised. Really? Just like that? Just like that. That evening, after they'd left, I stood in my garage with the Impala. I'd made real progress on her. The engine was rebuilt. The interior was halfway restored. Working with my hands had always helped me think clearly. I understood now what needed to happen. Richard and Justin Caldwell had made a fundamental miscalculation. They'd looked at me and seen an easy target, a sentimental old man desperate for his daughter's love, willing to be bled dry just to stay in her life. They'd seen weakness where there was patience, stupidity where there was strategy. I checked my phone. Patricia had sent a message. Found all 4 creditors. They're interested. Call me. I smiled in the dim light of the garage, oil on my hands, the smell of restored metal in the air. And that's when I understood exactly how to repay them. A week later, the debt purchase was complete. Patricia's intermediaries had negotiated with all 4 of Richard Caldwell's creditors. The final price, $290,000 for debts with a face value of $340,000, a discount for delinquent accounts that the original creditors had given up on collecting. Richard didn't know yet. The paperwork took time to process, and I'd specifically requested that notification be delayed until I was ready. In the meantime, the wedding preparations reached their crescendo. That weekend, I called Allison and Justin to my office at the main dealership. They arrived together, Justin in another expensive suit, Allison looking nervous. They'd never been to my office before. I'd always kept my work life separate from my personal disappointments. My office overlooked the showroom floor. Through the glass, they could see rows of luxury vehicles, salespeople working with customers, the machinery of a successful business humming along smoothly. I watched Justin's eyes calculate values, probably wondering how much he could extract from me over the years. Sit down, I said. They sat. Justin sprawled back like he owned the chair. Allison perched on the edge of hers. I need to tell you something about the wedding, I began. Allison's eyes widened. Dad, if this is about the honeymoon costs, I won't be attending. Silence. Complete. Shocked silence. What? Allison's voice came out small, confused. I have urgent business in Orlando that week. It can't be rescheduled. I won't be at the ceremony. You're joking. Her face flushed red. This is my wedding, your only daughter's wedding, and you're choosing business over me? The business meeting was scheduled months ago. Important clients. I can't cancel. Justin leaned forward, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not anger, calculation, suspicion. Thomas, surely your staff can handle one meeting? This is Allison's big day. My staff can't handle this particular meeting. I'll be there personally, or we lose the account. Allison stood up, her hands shaking. This is unbelievable. After everything we've been through, after all the planning, you're just abandoning me. I'm not abandoning you. I've paid for everything, haven't I? $85,000. The wedding will be perfect. I just won't be there to see it. That's not the same. Tears started running down her face. I don't care about the money. I want my father at my wedding. It was a lie. She absolutely cared about the money. But the tears looked real enough. Some part of her, buried under the layers of entitlement Justin had cultivated, still wanted her father's approval. I'm sorry, Allison. Sometimes life requires difficult choices. She stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe the man who would have canceled anything for her had died the night I heard Justin's plan. You're being selfish, she said. You're punishing me because you don't like Justin. This is your way of showing disapproval. If that's what you think. Justin stood, putting his arm around Allison. Come on, honey. We don't need him there. Your day will be beautiful regardless. They left. Through my office window, I watched them walk to their car. Allison was crying. Justin was on his phone before they'd even reached the parking lot. I made my own call. Martin, I need you to monitor Justin's communications. Legally, of course. Just track who he calls. When. Duration. Can you do that? Already on it. His phone records are public with the right subpoena, and I've got a contact at his carrier. 3 days later, Martin sent me a transcript. Justin had called his father within minutes of leaving my office. "The old man's not coming to the wedding," Justin had said. "Claims he has business in Orlando." "Do you believe him?" Richard's voice skeptical. "I don't know. He's been acting strange, paying everything without argument, but there's something off about it, like he's too cooperative. You're paranoid." "Maybe, but I can't shake the feeling he suspects something. The way he looked at me when he said he wouldn't be there, it was cold, really cold." "So what if he suspects? What can he do? You're marrying his daughter. He either plays nice or loses her forever." "I guess you're right. Still, maybe we should be careful at the wedding. Keep the toast subtle." "Subtle? We've been planning this for months. Don't lose your nerve now." I listened to the recording 3 times. They knew something was off. Good. Let them worry. Let them second guess. Paranoia was its own punishment. 2 days after that, I finalized the last pieces with Roger. "The trust documents are complete," he said, spreading them across his desk. "Everything you own is now held in the Thomas Merrick Living Trust. You're the trustee with full control during your lifetime. Upon your death, assets pass to named beneficiaries, currently Allison, but only if specific conditions are met. And those conditions? Demonstrating respect and support for you during your lifetime. The trust includes a provision that you can remove any beneficiary who fails to meet these standards. I've documented several incidents already, per your instructions. Witness statements, that audio recording you provided, financial records showing their exploitation of your generosity. How solid is this legally? Extremely. Florida law strongly supports a grantor's right to set conditions on inheritance. You'd need clear evidence of beneficiary misconduct, which you have. The audio recording alone would likely be sufficient. I signed the papers, every single one. By the time I walked out of Roger's office, I owned nothing personally. Thomas Merrick, the man, was worth maybe $10,000 in checking account balances. Everything else, the house, the dealerships, the investments, belonged to the trust. Allison could contest it eventually, but she'd lose, and by the time the legal dust settled, she'd understand exactly what she'd thrown away. The morning of the wedding approached. I spent it in my garage with the Impala. The engine purred now, smooth and powerful after months of patient work. I'd rebuilt her from the ground up, piece by piece, the same way I'd built my business. The same way I was rebuilding my relationship with my daughter, by stripping away everything false until only the truth remained. That evening I sent the final piece into motion. A letter, prepared by Roger, sent via certified mail to Richard Caldwell at his Clearwater address. "Dear Mr. Caldwell," it began, "this letter serves as official notification that I am now the sole creditor for all your outstanding debts, totaling $340,000. These debts were purchased from your previous creditors and are now due in full within 30 days of receipt of this notice." The letter went on to detail every debt, every missed payment, every legal remedy I could pursue if he failed to pay. It was perfectly legal, perfectly cold, and perfectly timed. Richard would receive it the day after the wedding, just when he thought they'd gotten away with everything. The wedding took place at the Renaissance Vinoy Resort in St. Petersburg, exactly as planned. I know because I hired a videographer, one Allison and Justin didn't know about, to record everything. I watched the footage later that evening, sitting in my study with a glass of good scotch. Allison looked beautiful in her dress. I'll give her that. She also looked wounded, her eyes scanning the crowd repeatedly, probably hoping I'd changed my mind and shown up anyway. When the officiant asked who gave this woman to be married, there was an awkward silence. One of Allison's cousins stood up and said, "Her family does," which got polite applause and confused looks from guests who knew I was alive and had paid for everything. Justin's toast was exactly what I expected. He held his champagne glass high, smiled his practiced smile, and said, "I want to thank everyone for being here today. It's unfortunate that Mr. Merrick couldn't join us. Apparently his vintage Chevrolet broke down again and needed his attention." Pause for laughter. Some people chuckled uncomfortably. Others looked confused. "But seriously," Justin continued, "Allison and I are grateful for his financial support. Even if he couldn't be here in person, his checkbook certainly was." More uncomfortable laughter. I watched Allison's face on the video. She looked mortified but didn't stop him. The wedding ended. They danced, cut the cake, opened envelopes full of cash gifts from my business associates and friends. Justin and Allison probably thought they'd won. They'd gotten their perfect wedding, their money, and they'd publicly mocked me without consequence. They were wrong. The next morning, a courier delivered 2 thick envelopes to the newlyweds' hotel suite. Inside each, a letter from Roger Wilson, my attorney, on official letterhead. I wasn't there to see their faces, but Roger called me with the details. He'd included a clause requiring them to acknowledge receipt within 24 hours, which meant calling his office. Allison called first, her voice shaking. "What is this? What does this mean?" "It means," Roger explained in his calm, professional tone, "that the property you believed would be your inheritance, specifically the house at 2847 Bayshore Boulevard, is not owned by your father personally. It's held in an irrevocable living trust. You are currently named as a beneficiary, but that designation is conditional on maintaining a respectful and supportive relationship with the grantor during his lifetime." That's insane. He can't just... He can, and he has. Florida law is very clear on a grantor's rights to set conditions for inheritance. The trust document includes substantial evidence of behavior contrary to those conditions. The audio recording of your husband planning to publicly humiliate your father. The pattern of financial exploitation. Your own words to your father, documented by witnesses, calling him jealous and old-fashioned. Silence on the phone. Then, "He recorded us?" The conversation took place in his home, where he had every right to record. More relevantly, your husband's stated intention to humiliate him at a wedding your father funded, to the tune of $85,000, demonstrates exactly the kind of disrespect that triggers the removal provisions. So what are you saying? I'm saying that unless you and your husband demonstrate a significant change in behavior and attitude, you will inherit nothing. The trust will transfer all assets to charitable organizations upon your father's death. You'll be formally notified of your removal as beneficiary if the current pattern continues. She hung up. Justin called 10 minutes later. Roger said his tone was different, aggressive, accusatory. "This is blackmail. You can't threaten to disinherit someone because they hurt your feelings. It's not blackmail, Mr. Caldwell. It's estate planning. And the conditions aren't about hurt feelings. They're about demonstrable respect and support. Your recorded statement planning to humiliate your father-in-law at a wedding he paid for shows neither respect nor support. That recording is illegal. We'll challenge it. You're welcome to try. Florida is a 2-party consent state, but the recording was made in Mr. Merrick's own home, where he has a reasonable expectation to monitor his property. Any attorney you consult will tell you the same thing. Now, is there anything else? I have other clients." Justin hung up too. Roger told me all this over lunch the following day. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown, away from anyone who might know us. "They're in shock," he said. "Complete shock. I don't think it had occurred to either of them that you might actually fight back. They thought I was a wallet with a pulse. They're learning otherwise. Oh, and Richard Caldwell received his notification yesterday. My office got a frantic call from him this morning. He wants to negotiate." I smiled. "Let him sweat for a few days. Then we'll talk." That same afternoon, Martin called, with news about Justin's employer. The report went out this morning. Anonymous tip to their compliance department. Fully documented evidence of Justin's terminations from previous positions. They've opened an internal investigation. He's been suspended from client-facing duties, pending review. How long will the investigation take? Couple weeks, maybe? But the outcome's pretty certain. 3 firings for financial impropriety. Even without criminal charges, no compliance department will let that slide. He'll be gone within a month. I thanked Martin and hung up. Then I sat in my office, looking out at the showroom, thinking about the next steps. Richard would come begging. That was certain. A man $340,000 in debt, with a house about to be foreclosed, doesn't have many options when his new creditor owns everything. Allison would be confused, angry, desperate. She'd married Justin thinking she was securing a comfortable future. Instead, she'd married a man about to lose his job, with crushing debt, and a father-in-law who now controlled their financial lives. And Justin? Justin was learning that intelligence and cunning weren't the same thing. He'd been clever enough to manipulate Allison, not clever enough to realize that some people don't show their hand until the game is already over. My phone rang. Allison's number. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. On the third call, I answered. Dad? Her voice was small, frightened. Dad, we need to talk. Please. Can we come over? I'm busy this week. This is important. It's about the letter from your lawyer. We need to discuss. There's nothing to discuss, Allison. The trust is established. The conditions are clear. Either you meet them or you don't. But that's not fair. You can't hold our entire future hostage because you chose a man who planned to humiliate me at your wedding. Because you took a $75,000 loan you planned to pay off with gifts from my friends. Because you've treated me like an ATM for 3 years. Silence. How did you know about the loan? She whispered. I know everything, Allison, every single thing. And now you're going to learn what it costs to mistake patience for weakness. I hung up. The game had moved from preparation to execution, and I was just getting started. The next morning, Justin's phone rang at precisely 9 o'clock. I know because Martin had his communications monitored, and he sent me the details within the hour. It was Justin's employer, a mid-tier financial consulting firm called Prospera Financial Group. The compliance director, a woman named Sandra Chen, had received an anonymous package the previous day. Inside, detailed documentation of Justin's 3 previous terminations, complete with dates, circumstances, and sworn statements from former colleagues. Mr. Caldwell, we need you to come in immediately, Sandra had said. There are some serious allegations that require immediate attention. Justin tried to play it cool, according to the office receptionist Martin had befriended. He showed up in his best suit, a confident smile in place. That confidence lasted approximately 15 minutes. By 10:30, he was suspended pending investigation. By 11, he was in his car, calling his father. They know everything, Justin's voice cracked on the recording Martin sent me. Someone sent them documentation of all 3 firings. They've suspended me. Dad, if this goes public, I'm finished in this industry. Richard's response was barely audible, but the panic came through clearly. That same afternoon, around 2 o'clock, my receptionist called my office. Mr. Merrick, there's a Richard Caldwell here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent. I let him wait 20 minutes. Not out of cruelty, well, not entirely, but because I was genuinely in a meeting with a fleet buyer. When I finally told my receptionist to send him up, I made sure to finish reviewing the contract first. Another 10 minutes. Richard Caldwell looked like he'd aged a decade since I'd last seen him at a family dinner 6 months ago. His skin had a grayish pallor, and his hands trembled as he gripped the arms of the chair across from my desk. Mr. Merrick, he began, his voice unsteady. Thomas, please, we need to talk about this debt situation. I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled. I'm listening. The letter I received, it says you own all my outstanding debts. $340,000. Due in 30 days. That's correct. I purchased them from your creditors. It's all perfectly legal. His face went from gray to white. I can't pay that. You know I can't. My firm is struggling. My house is mortgaged beyond its value. I need more time. Please. Interesting. I opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Because according to the phone conversation you had with your son on the evening of March 15th, you were quite confident. In fact, you laughed when Justin said he planned to humiliate me at the wedding. Do you remember that? The color that had drained from his face didn't return. If anything, he went paler. You called me a nouveau riche type who needed a lesson in humility. Those were your exact words, Mr. Caldwell. I didn't mean... You absolutely meant it. You and your son saw me as an easy mark. A sentimental old fool who'd keep paying and paying just to stay in his daughter's life. You were right about one thing. I am nouveau riche. I started as a mechanic, worked with my hands, built my business from nothing. And now, this nouveau riche type owns your financial future. I slid a document across the desk. Here's the payment schedule. Full amount due in 16 days. If you can't pay, I'll exercise my legal right to pursue collection. That includes foreclosure on your house in Clearwater. He stared at the paper like it might bite him. Please. I didn't know what Justin was planning. I swear if I'd known he'd actually go through with it. But you encouraged it. You laughed. You participated. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But surely you can show some mercy. For Allison's sake, if not mine. I stood up. The meeting is over, Mr. Caldwell. You have 16 days. I suggest you use them wisely. He stood too, unsteady on his feet. You're destroying my life over a stupid phone conversation? No, I'm holding you accountable for who you actually are. There's a difference. He left, shoulders slumped, looking every bit like a man who'd just realized the water he was treading had sharks in it. I sat back down and returned to work. I had 3 more meetings that afternoon, and I refused to let the Caldwells disrupt my schedule any more than necessary. That evening, around 6 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I was in the garage. Where else? Working on the Impala's interior. The front seats were finally restored, deep maroon leather that matched the exterior paint. Through the side window, I could see 2 figures on my front porch, Allison and Justin. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked to the front door. I didn't open it all the way, just stood in the doorway, blocking entry. Allison's eyes were red from crying. Justin looked like he hadn't slept. Dad! Allison started, her voice pleading. Please, we need to talk to you. Can we come in? No? Dad, you can say whatever you need to say from right there. Justin stepped forward. I noticed his hands were clenched, his jaw tight, anger simmering under a thin veneer of control. Thomas, this has gone far enough. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Now we need to discuss how to resolve this situation like adults. I am resolving it. You're the ones with the problem. Allison's tears started flowing harder. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? Why are you punishing me? The question hung in the air. Part of me, a small, weakening part, wanted to comfort her, to pull my daughter into my arms and tell her everything would be okay. But the larger part, the part that had spent weeks planning this moment, knew that comfort now would undo everything. Come back tomorrow afternoon, I said. 2 o'clock. I'll explain everything then. Why not now? Justin demanded. Because I said tomorrow. 2 o'clock. Don't be late. I closed the door. They arrived at exactly 2 o'clock the next day. I'd spent the morning preparing, making sure every piece was in place. This time, I invited them in, led them to the living room, the same room where I'd overheard Justin's phone call all those weeks ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, and I'm certain it wasn't lost on Justin either. He kept glancing at the window, probably calculating whether I'd recorded other conversations. He had no idea. They sat on the couch. I remained standing. Before we begin, I said, pulling out my phone, I want you to hear something. I pressed play. Justin's voice filled the room, tinny but clear from the phone speaker. On the ceremony, I'm going to humiliate this pathetic old fool in front of everyone. Picture his face when I say in my toast that he's just a mechanic who got lucky. Allison's face went slack with shock. Richard's voice followed. Finally, someone's going to put him in his place. These nouveau riche types need a lesson in humility. I stopped the recording. The silence was absolute. That's not... Allison started, but the words died. Justin said nothing. His face had gone completely blank, the mask of confidence finally stripped away. That was recorded on March 15th, I said calmly. In this room. You were standing approximately where you're sitting now, Justin, planning to humiliate me at a wedding I was paying $85,000 to host. You recorded us? Allison's voice came out as a whisper. That's illegal. It's my house. Florida law allows me to record conversations in my own home. More importantly, it's evidence of exactly who you married, Allison. Justin finally found his voice. This is entrapment. Spying. You had no right. I had every right, and here's what else I have rights to. I picked up a folder from the side table. Richard Caldwell's debts. All $340,000 of them. I own them now. I purchased them legally through intermediaries from his creditors. I pulled out another document. Your employment history, Justin. 3 terminations for financial impropriety. Your current employer received this information yesterday. I imagine they're not pleased. His hands were shaking now. Actual visible tremors. And this, I continued, pulling out the trust documents, is proof that everything you thought you were marrying into doesn't exist. The house, the dealerships, my entire estate. It's all in an irrevocable trust with very specific conditions for inheritance. Conditions that include demonstrating respect and support, which, as you can imagine, you've spectacularly failed to meet. Allison stood up abruptly. This is insane. You can't destroy our lives because your feelings were hurt. Feelings? I looked at her, really looked at her. Allison, your husband took a $75,000 loan in your name, planning to pay it off with cash gifts from my friends at the wedding. He's been fired 3 times for stealing from clients. His father is bankrupt and encouraged him to publicly humiliate me. And you're telling me this is about hurt feelings? She opened her mouth, closed it. No words came. Justin stood too, his face flushed red now instead of pale. You think you're so smart. You think you've won. But you're making a huge mistake, old man. I'll sue you. I'll take everything you have. You'll what? My voice cut through his bluster like ice. Sue me with what money? What lawyer? Your father's broke. You're about to be unemployed, and you're $75,000 in debt. By all means, try. He took a step toward me. For a moment I thought he might actually try something physical. But he stopped, breathing hard, realizing how far he'd already fallen. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Richard has 16 days to pay his debts, or I start foreclosure proceedings. Justin, your employer will complete their investigation and terminate you within the week. They have no choice given your history. Allison, you're married to a man with no job, crushing debt, and a father who's losing everything. The inheritance you thought was waiting for you? Gone. The comfortable life you planned? Gone. Allison sank back onto the couch, her face in her hands. But here's the thing, I continued, my voice softer now. I'm not doing this to destroy you, Allison. I'm doing this so you understand what you've become. You chose money over family, status over integrity. You let this man, I gestured at Justin, turn you into someone who sees her own father as a resource to exploit, rather than a person to love. I never, she tried to say, but I held up my hand. You did. You absolutely did. And until you face that, really face it, nothing changes. Justin's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and whatever he saw there made his face go even more rigid. I need to go, he said abruptly. We need to go. Run along, I said, but be here tomorrow. Same time. We're not finished. After they left, I stood at the window watching their car pull away. Justin was gesticulating wildly, probably raging about what I'd done. Allison sat motionless in the passenger seat. My phone rang. Martin, the employer just sent termination paperwork, he said. Justin's officially done, and I've got something else you'll want to know. Richard Caldwell just listed his house for sale. Emergency listing price well below market value. He's desperate. Keep me informed. I hung up and returned to the garage. The Impala was almost complete now. Just a few more details, some fine-tuning. Everything was falling into place, exactly as planned. But watching Allison's face in that living room, seeing the realization dawn that her choices had consequences, that hurt more than I'd expected. Good, I thought. It should hurt. That's how you know it's real. Tomorrow would bring the final pieces together. Tomorrow, they'd understand that I wasn't just punishing them. I was teaching them. 5 days passed. 5 days of silence from the Caldwells. I spent them productively, finalizing the terms with Roger, coordinating with my financial director about Richard's company, preparing the documents they'd need to sign. On the 5th day, all 3 of them appeared at my door together. Justin, Allison, and Richard. They looked like survivors of a shipwreck, clinging to the last piece of driftwood. This time I let them in, led them to my dining room, where I'd laid out documents on the polished mahogany table. Richard spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Merrick, Thomas, we're here to ask for mercy. I sat down at the head of the table. They remained standing until I gestured for them to sit. I'm listening. Richard's hand shook as he pulled papers from a briefcase. My company, Caldwell Investment Services. It's worth nothing on paper, but the client list, the infrastructure, I want to give it to you. All of it. in exchange for restructuring the debt. I glanced at the documents. He was right. The company was essentially worthless. But the gesture was what mattered. Justin cleared his throat. I'll issue a public apology. Write letters to everyone who attended the wedding. Explain what I did, what I planned. Take full responsibility. And you, Allison? I looked at my daughter. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen. I was wrong, Dad, about everything. About Justin, about you, about what matters. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. The room fell silent. I let it stretch, watching them squirm. Here's what's going to happen, I finally said. I'll accept your offers, but with conditions. Non-negotiable conditions. I pulled out my own documents, sliding them across the table. Justin, you will send a letter of apology to all 120 wedding guests. I will personally review and approve the content. You will detail exactly what you plan to do, acknowledge your employment history, and take full responsibility for your actions. No excuses, no justifications. Justin's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Richard, I'm taking operational control of Caldwell Investment Services for 2 years. My financial director will work with you to restructure the debt and rebuild the client base. You'll work under his supervision. If the company becomes profitable again, I'll return control to you. If not, it closes and the debt is partially forgiven based on good faith effort. Richard's eyes glistened. Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You'll be working harder than you've ever worked in your life. I turned to Allison. This was the hardest part. You will work in the customer service department at my Dale Mabry dealership for 6 months. Minimum wage, no special treatment. You'll answer phones, handle complaints, learn what it means to earn money instead of expecting it. Her face paled. 6 months? 6 months. And during that time, you and Justin will live on what he can earn, which, given his employment prospects, won't be much. The apartment I've been paying for? That stops immediately. You're adults. Act like it. Where will we live? Her voice cracked. That's your problem to solve. Welcome to the real world, Allison. I pulled out the final document. Justin, you will sign this. It's a legal waiver of any claim to my estate, now or in the future. You will never, under any circumstances, have any right to anything I own. Justin stared at the paper like it was a death sentence. And if I refuse? Then I proceed with foreclosing on Richard's house. You both face the full weight of your debts with no assistance from me, and Allison loses any chance of ever being reinstated as a trust beneficiary. Your choice. He picked up the pen. His hand trembled as he signed. There's one more thing, I said, looking at all three of them. If, and this is a significant if, you complete these terms successfully, if Allison demonstrates genuine change over these 6 months, if Justin shows actual remorse and rebuilding of character, I might consider limited reinstatement of trust benefits. Not full inheritance, but enough to provide some security. Allison's head snapped up. Really? I said might. This is contingent on real change, not performance. I'll know the difference. They left with their copies of the agreements, shoulders slumped, faces showing a mix of relief and despair. They'd been given a lifeline, but it came with a cost they'd never imagined paying. After they left, I poured myself a drink and stood at the window overlooking the bay. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. Martin called. The apology letters went out today. FedEx certified mail. All 120 guests will have them by tomorrow. Good. How do you feel? I considered the question, like I just performed surgery. It was necessary, it was painful, but maybe, just maybe, the patient will survive. The next day, the responses started coming in. Some of my business associates called directly, shocked by Justin's confession. Others sent supportive messages telling me they'd suspected something was wrong. A few even apologized for not saying anything sooner. The public humiliation Justin had planned for me had become his own reality. Poetic justice, I suppose. A month passed, then another. Allison showed up for her first day at the dealership, wearing jeans and a simple blouse, her designer wardrobe abandoned. I watched from my office as my customer service manager, Rita, showed her the phones, the computer system, the complaint logs. She was terrible at first. Used to getting her way, she struggled with angry customers who didn't care who her father was. But slowly, So slowly, I almost missed it. She changed. I saw her one day, 3 months in, patiently explaining to an elderly woman why her warranty claim was denied, then quietly calling our service department to see if they could offer a discount anyway. The old Allison would have transferred the call and forgotten about it. Justin found work at a small accounting firm in Tampa, entry-level position, fraction of his previous salary. He and Allison rented a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that made Allison's face tight with embarrassment when I asked about it. But they paid their own rent, bought their own groceries, lived within their means. Richard, under my financial director's supervision, slowly brought Caldwell Investment Services back from the brink. He worked 12-hour days, rebuilt relationships with old clients, learned humility that wealth had never taught him. One evening in mid-May, almost exactly 2 months after their surrender, I invited Allison to dinner at my house. She arrived alone, parking her old Honda, sold the luxury car apparently, in my driveway. She looked different, tired, thinner, but something in her eyes had changed. The entitled princess was gone. In her place was someone I almost recognized from years ago. We ate in silence for a while. I'd made pot roast, her favorite when she was young. "Dad," she finally said, setting down her fork. Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. What Justin was doing, what I was becoming. I was blind." Tears rolled down her cheeks. Real ones this time, not the manipulative crying I'd seen before. I thought I knew what success looked like. Expensive things, the right connections, never having to struggle. But these past months, working for minimum wage, watching you treat me exactly like every other employee, she wiped her eyes. I finally understand. You were never the problem. I was. I reached across the table and took her hand. I forgive you, Allison, but you need to remember this. Really remember it. Not just until things get comfortable again, but for the rest of your life. I will, I promise I will. The apartment I was paying for, you're not getting that back. You and Justin will continue to support yourselves. I know. But, I continued, I'm willing to offer Justin something. A reference letter for a position in Jacksonville. It's a legitimate opportunity, better than what he has now, but it requires relocation. If he accepts, you'll have to decide if you go with him or stay here. She nodded slowly. We've talked about starting over somewhere new, away from all of this. It might be good for both of you. 3 weeks later, they moved to Jacksonville. I helped them load the U-Haul, not financially, but physically. Justin looked at me warily as we carried boxes, probably waiting for another trap. There wasn't one. Take care of her, I told him as they prepared to leave, and don't ever think about using her again. I'll be watching. He met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw something other than calculation there. Fear, maybe. Respect, possibly. I understand, sir. The day they left, I returned to my garage. The Impala was complete. Every piece restored, every detail perfect. The maroon paint gleamed under the overhead lights. The chrome sparkled. The engine purred like it did when it first rolled off the assembly line in 1967. I ran my hand along the hood, feeling the smooth metal under my palm. This car had witnessed the beginning of my plan that March evening. Now it witnessed the end. Building her had taught me patience. Restoring what was broken required time, precision, and unwavering commitment to the vision of what she could be. Same with family, I suppose. Richard continued working at his company under my oversight. The debt was being repaid in installments, slowly but steadily. He'd never be wealthy again, but he'd learn something more valuable, the difference between success and character. I sat in the driver's seat of the Impala, hands on the steering wheel, and allowed myself a small smile. The Caldwells had thought I was a soft target, a sentimental old man they could exploit indefinitely. They'd learned otherwise. I'd spent my life building things, businesses, relationships, this car. And when someone tried to destroy what I'd built, I didn't respond with rage or violence. I responded with precision, patience, strategy. They'd wanted to humiliate me at a wedding I paid for. Instead, they'd humiliated themselves in front of everyone who mattered. They'd planned to exploit my wealth for years. Instead, they'd lost access to everything they'd counted on. They'd seen me as weak, Instead, they discovered what real strength looked like. Justice isn't always fast. Sometimes it takes planning, sacrifice, and the willingness to make hard choices. But when it arrives, when those who've wronged you finally understand the consequences of their actions, that's worth every moment of patience. I turned the key. The Impala's engine roared to life, powerful and smooth, exactly as it should be. Some things are worth the effort to restore. Some people too. And some lessons can only be learned the hard way. I smiled as I pulled out of the garage into the Florida evening, the setting sun painting everything gold. Justice isn't always swift, but it's always precise. If you like this story, subscribe to our new channel and listen to a few stories there. You can find the link to it in the collaboration or description of this video or in the comments. Subscribe so you don't lose us, because this channel may soon cease to exist.